Good afternoon, everyone. And first, I have to thank the National Archives of Malaysia for kindly inviting me to give my presentation to you. It's really exciting to me as a user to be among so many archivists. In this talk, I would like to discuss first the characteristics of the archival materials that are kept at the National Archives of Thailand in Bangkok. This is described through a few examples of my research and practical work as an architectural historian for the past 10, 12 years. The National Archives was first established in 1916 as a part of the National Library. In 1952, it became separated from the National Library and eventually has its own building in the same compound. This kind of sinister-looking 5-story building is the main office, with now 10 provincial branches throughout the country. But to students of Bangkok history, this is the most important repository of research materials. Official documents from the late 19th century through the 20th century constitute the bulk of the archive's holdings, especially after state agencies are required by law, the National Archives Act, to send their backlog documents to the National Archives. There are also collections of private papers and other materials as well. And like any archives, the Thai National Archives provide a range of media, text, cartographic, photographic, as well as architectural drawings, sketches, and plans. Some years ago, I did a research on Pramen, this kind of building. It's the temporary crematoria for high-ranking members of the royal family. I used many types of media offered at the archives. An example is one such building. This one was erected in 1920 for a prince. An image here showed the funeral procession, and there was the whole album of the funeral. And there was also the architectural drawing signed by the architect, as well as the detailed design for the decorations inside the structure. And a map showing the grounds of the cremation site, and of course, hundreds of pages of documents pertaining to the preparation and execution of the cremation. Another line of research that I've conducted is on the history of Dusit Palace, a vast compound of buildings, streets, canals, bridges, which were constructed by King Rama V during the turn of the 20th century. Again, the National Archives was the main source of research materials with historic photographs, maps, documents, and architectural drawings. What makes the research so interesting and challenging was how to put together the information from these various sources in different forms in order to reconstruct and to understand the genesis and transformation of this particular royal residence, which remains in use until today. Another type of research that I sometimes conduct is for the purpose of the historic preservation of buildings. Frequently, there are specific questions from the architects who are in charge of the restoration of some old buildings. Which parts of the buildings are original and which are later additions? Which period in its history should we return the building to? What would be the most historically appropriate color for the building? These are just some of the common, frequently asked questions, which need some quick archival search in order to get some well-informed, academically appropriate answers. An example here, this particular building was a restoration of a hospital building that is close to my university right in the heart of Bangkok. It was built in about 1920 by a princess and has become one of the 4 but very few historic buildings remaining in that hospital compound. Prior to the restoration, the building was white and beige in color, like in recent memory, which was found. The architect, however, did some paint analysis and proposed to paint it bright yellow, as shown in this image. The yellow pigment was found at a layer of the paint, and that, of course, was rather shocking to the hospital administrators, and I was asked for an opinion on that. So I spent an afternoon at the National Archives and discovered lots of documents, including this particular historic photograph, hand-painted, that showed the building in beige gray with the doors and windows that were blue on the inside and green on the outside. And that, together with a comparative study of the building paint from the 1920s, led to my alternatives that was proposed to the hospital administrators. Another example here was the case of the so-called the Peacock Gate. This gate was built during the early 19th century by King Rama III to mark an entry from the river to a major Buddhist monastery called Wat Po. It was located south of the Grand Palace. There was a city wall along the river with a city gate, and right next to the city gate was the Peacock Gate that was named after the peacock-shaped sculpture that was put on the top of the gate. But anyway, the city gate, the city walls, as well as the Peacock Gate were all demolished in the late 19th century. And about 5 years ago, the monastery proposed to reconstruct the Peacock Gate as well as to build a new river landing, as shown in this perspective here, as well as a lane of shops to accommodate more tourists. The proposal was historically wrong, as the designer combined two different gates, the City Gate and the Peacock Gate, into one design with no verifiable reference. The proposal was submitted to the Historical Commission, which was in charge of the old historic district of Bangkok. And suspicious of the design, the commission asked me to study if it was historically correct or not. So again, I went to the archives and discovered a few key evidence. This map shows it dates from the late 19th century, and showing the waterfront development in the area, and right before the walls and the gates were demolished. So it clearly shows that there were two separate buildings, the City Gate and the Peacock Gate. There was also the historic photographs showing the actual forms of the City Gate, which was totally the one with the kind of pointed top, totally different from what was proposed in the reconstruction design. And eventually, the proposed design was rejected by the Historical Commission. What I've shown so far are examples of my use of archival documents in my work. As a big fan of the National Archives, I always encourage everyone to come explore the collection. However, I also usually warn them that there are limitations to the data that one should be aware of. To begin with, as the major part of the collections comes from the government agencies, the data on the private realm, the people, the general public, the everyday life of commoners is less well presented. In other words, it is relatively easy to do a detective work on a hospital building or a major palace or a city gate, as these were major public structures that were built using government sources. So it is natural that traces of that construction remained to be found in the various ministerial records. It's much more difficult to get any information on the construction of private houses, the private land transaction, or the inheritance of private properties, as these were not always recorded in the public papers. What should be noted here is that the National Archives also had maintained a growing collection of private papers, mostly from notable persons, princes, members of the royal family, and so on. But much more remains to be collected for the use of future researchers, not just papers, but also photographs, maps, plans, movies, everything. I would like to conclude with a project that I've been working with the archives for the past 2 years. The man on the left of the photo was Jira Silapakanok, a major master of modern architecture in Thailand during the Cold War. During his 30-year career, he had built many of Bangkok's landmarks, including these two. On the left, a major hotel, and on the right, a movie theater. He had also designed dozens of banks, as well as numerous houses of those rich bankers. In the late 1990s, he stopped working, keeping thousands of architectural drawings in his home office. And about 7 years ago, I was part of a research team that worked on the life and career of Thai modern masters. We chose to study about 80 of them, many of whom had died already. With that research project, we got to have an interview with Mr. Jira at his home office. And we were truly amazed by the well-kept drawings as well as construction documents, contracts, everything. In 2013, Mr. Jira died, but the image of dozens of filing cabinets and old drafting tables remained on my mind. After a couple of years, I contacted his daughter, who kindly let me do whatever we would do with the legacy of her father. And finally, last year, we moved all the drawings from his house to the National Archives. I had brought some students to do a preliminary count of the drawings, all 40,000 of them. To architectural historians, many of these are crucial as an evidence of our heritage of modern architecture in Thailand. As shown in these examples of the fine modern homes of Bangkok, many of which have been recently torn down. The cinema and the hotel remain standing, but their futures are not so bright. In any case, these drawings certainly help enrich our understanding of Thailand in the 20th century, as well as a contribution towards the growth of the National Archives collection. In Thailand, the use of archival materials for practical and commercial purposes is still very limited, mainly in the use of images as references for period films, art exhibitions, TV series, that kind of thing. The country's long history of photography has left us with a considerable number of historic photographs of great historical importance. A collection of about 40,000 glass plate negatives from the late 19th century and early 20th century has just been registered as the memory of the world by UNESCO. And that has brought the general public's attention to the resources at the National Archives. But yet the real increase in commercial usages remain to be seen. To conclude, I think from a user's perspective, there are great challenges ahead for the National Archives of Thailand. The idea of advocacy, the use of media technology, and the ever-growing amount of archival data, all in all to anticipate the future use of archival materials for practical and commercial purposes. Thank you.
Good evening, all of Sarbika delegates. Lovely to meet you in Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya. Maybe we can enjoy the film based on Arsip Nasional Files. This is about Gelora Bung Karno Stadium, main stadium. This is the archive from Arsip Nasional that used by National TV of Indonesia. Mixed with information about and interpreted by architects or historians. Okay. The background is I will preparing exhibition in Balekirti Museum at Bogor Palace is about a role of two presidents of Indonesia when they preparing Asian Games event in Indonesia as host. Indonesia will be a host in Asian Games. So to remind the story, we need a lot of data to harnessing the story in the past as the state archive to introduce our millennial age and the delegates. The exhibition entitled is Dua Presiden RI, Republik Indonesia, Tuan Rumah Asian Games 1962 dan 2018. This is my abstract, maybe you can find it. This is the background. This is the title of exhibition. This is the record of journalists. This is the poster of exhibition. We created all based of archive from other resources, especially from Arsip Nasional Indonesia. This is the place of presentation of exhibition. And the curatorial text is about the exhibition. Is a part of my research starting when I was a student at historian doctoral in University of Indonesia and architectural study from Faculty of Engineering of University of Indonesia. The research base is about the Sukarno architectural ideas that he encouraged to create how to present the national pride of Indonesia through an architectural building. And then after I post my graduated, the national TV of Indonesia uses my resources, especially based on my dissertation, to create the film documentary in Indonesia related Sukarno ideas in all of ideas architectural building. Maybe it's very unique about ideas because before they did not to study about it, and I harnessing the archive by archive to become idea, a whole ideas of Sukarno Grid's idea architectural. This is one selected national TV users entitled Art Insight, Wajah Arsitektur Gelora Bung Karno, related the Asian Games event. I'm preparing the storylines about the show to Metro TV. They asked me to contributing by my own archives and Henry to show the old, the originally designed, and the new main stadium. I hybrid the old design and the new design to present to all of delegates to Asian Games. I think fortunately, Metro TV give me to present all of the glory of the main stadium, Gelora Bung Karno, to present the past and the glory of main stadium by Joko Widodo ideas to present the millennial age. So, by a grounded theory, maybe it's about technically, I put the data step by step, year for year, to collecting all of the data, and I show to the exhibition toward the Asian Games to introduce how Sukarno, when he collected the idea and visualized high idea with the most architect team design, and how Sukarno to encourage our young architect in this year, and after that, how President Joko Widodo, how to encourage our professional architect and the last year to present to glory to all of delegate of Asian Games. This is my own academic archive that used to connect it, the old and the new. We have the spirit of Sukarno, how to become Indonesian Asian Game host. This is the private archive from Mr. Sudarsono is Sukarno staff, especially the archive related of Sukarno, and the Indonesian Secretary of State contribute about originally drawing of most project. We have the original drawing project from Moscow, and maybe Mr. Lim can introduce, become our main stadium to become UNESCO historical state. Maybe I introduce for all. We have the originally to present how the Indonesian have collaboration with other country to preparing all of the venue. This is also the private archive of Edi Sunarso sculpture to present the welcoming statue in front of Hotel Indonesia as a landmark of Asian Games. And the private archive of Sukarno, when he visit at Moscow and how the Moscow have a friendship with our country. And the Gelora Bung Karno management contribute the new Gelora Bung Karno Stadium now with many of glory of lighting. And after that, my lovely student gave me a Lumion main stadium of Gelora Bung Karno. It means based on the archive, architect can create it another artifact or another thing to present to connected with a millennial age. And I have a retouching of photograph Sukarno, old photograph Sukarno and old photograph of many, retouching to shopping and to elegancy of the archive. Then I can reveal the Sukarno ideas of architecture that he need to glory the pride of Indonesian as a big nation. And also President Joko Widodo need to glory the historical site to become a new Gelora Bung Karno main stadium facade. And I quote the icon of Mr. Sukarno at the speech message of President Sukarno. I have seen them other countries, but oh, this mini stadium of Jakarta is the best of the world. This is a iconic quote of Sukarno in Gelora Bung Karno. This is a part of Arsip Nasional Archive. And the Limion, this I show to all of them after that. Joko Widodo have to revitalization of the main stadium. The data resources from the archive, from ministry, from Gelora Bung Karno management, and reveal the idea of Joko Widodo architectural idea. Especially to show the aesthetic design, the main stadium of London must have a character of national heritage. He need to keep the originality of stadium by inserting the new idea of IT with illumination and something to handicapped people and show the all of the many color to become energy of Asia. Role of National Archive in my career is absolutely contribute in all of my career. Honestly, my academic career starting from the Arsip Nasional and during the doctoral study. And after that, I collecting, but unfortunately, Arsip Nasional maybe not all supporting me because they maybe need to arsip of private company or private consultant have to collaborate it. Because I'm in a professional architecture, need to more of architectural document. Maybe start from this program, Arsip Nasional can collecting all of the architecture drawing. And I suggest the Archive Nasional of Asia, maybe we offer to a virtual archive collaboration to enrich to Serbia by inserting the virtual archive, maybe like virtual museum, that the millennial can use in computer or in the apps, maybe to enrich the program of NRM, maybe to enrich from talent to creating the architecture and other to become a excellence archive. And then my conclusion is the archive is a very important thing that maybe can encourage the millennial age generation to get closer to the great historical memories like I described before. Thank you for all my presentation, and please inserting the sort of video about Gelora Bung Karno. This is by Lumion, based on the archive of architectural drawing again and created by the program. Pada saat rancangan, pada saat gagasan, Bung Karno mengemukakan bahwa saya mau konstruksinya temu gelang. Desainnya mengarah kepada bentuk-bentuk melingkar itu. Itu tanda bahwa Bung Karno sudah intervensi menjadi seorang arsitek. Saya rasa ini satu simbol atau strategi Bung Karno untuk mengedepankan konsep-konsep yang Indonesia sekali. Jadi namanya saja temu gelang, sesuatu benda yang melingkar dan saling menguatkan, yang tidak berujung. Dan dari sini Bung Karno ingin menyampaikan bahwa karya arsitektur yang digagas untuk Gelora Bung Karno adalah sesuatu yang original dari Indonesia. This is my presentation, and the millennial age get closer to the great historical of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akip, for inviting me today. I'm actually quite excited because I've always wanted to share how much archive is so important in my work. Especially when it comes to, our historical work. I guess what I'm presenting today, it's about the idea of using archive, the idea of using things of the past in our presentation today. And from Rack Focus Films, we believe in reliving history, reliving the past. And knowing it, or realizing it, or learning a lot more about our past in a different way, in a different perspective. And this is one of the ways that we do. We actually produce documentaries for international channels. But before I start my presentation, I think I'll just play a 30 seconds trailer of one of my past documentaries.
This is the first time there's been a Malay organisation targeting British policy.
The Malaysians may be tempered, lazy, indolent, but when they know they were driven to the wall, they fought back.
A gathering of Malay leaders, of Chinese leaders, of Indian leaders, of Eurasian leaders to swap ideas.
They came to some sort of understanding that can't have a Malay-centric party gaining independence.
We thought that he would certainly not want to have anything to do with the other communities.
Then obviously the Malays did not have faith in his leadership.
Okay. All right. My company is called Rack Focus Films in Berhad. We are a 13-year-old company. We've been producing a lot for regional channels, and mainly the History Channel, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, Channel News Asia, and a lot more. So our main, again, it's nonfiction. We are, we produce a lot of things of the past. We used to do a lot of crime shows and historical shows. Crime shows and military shows. And recently, for the last 3 years, we've been producing a lot of historical shows. And what you saw just now from the trailer is actually from one of our successful series that we produced called Road to Nationhood. If you have watched it on television for the last 3 years, it was on History Channel, it was on, for this year, it was on National Geographic, and it was on many of the Astro. It was on many of the Astro channels. It was on many of the Astro channels, and then it was basically about the history of Malaysia from after the war and until why Malaysia was formed. And then for this year we did a special on the Konfrontasi, which was we expanded from our last year's series called Formation of Malaysia. We talk about how Malaysia was formed and how the involvement of Lee Kuan Yew in forming Malaysia, and how important he was in that particular area. And then for this year we talk about Konfrontasi, and we have a 2-hour special on the Sarawak series, 120 years of Sarawak history. It's called Sarawak Reclaim. I'll show it to you, the trailer, later. But basically, this is what we've been producing in the last 13 years. I started with Making the Cut. It was about circumcision. It was about, snip, snip. So it was about this circumcision practice among the Malay communities, the tradition, and the modern, which is the clam, if any of you have seen it. It's a weird-looking clam. But that was my first documentary, international documentary. So it was for more than 10 years ago. And then the rest, it was, some of them were military shows, and some of them are crime shows. If you are familiar with the Kenny Ong murder, it was on the Crime and Investigation Network. It was we did a the incident of the Kenny Ong murder from the perspective of the police and the family of the mom, actually the mother of Kenny Ong, the deceased Kenny Ong. And then for the last 3 years, from 2015, we've been concentrating on purely historical show, which is Road to Nationhood, what I mentioned to you. And then that's because the reason was because I flipped over this book called Road to Nationhood by New Straits Times in the library of New Straits Times. And then I was so amazed by their images and their archives. And then, we decided as a team, me and my team, we decided to actually produce a documentary that based on that book. And then actually it became more than the book right now. So we have a Sarawak history that is not in the book, which we expanded for season 3 this year. And then we have something about Konfrontasi, which we actually dig through a lot, of archive in Asip, Indonesia, because it was about the Konfrontasi. And then, of course, we needed to get images from Indonesia, and then we got some. We used some in our documentaries, and then so that was the season 3 of this year. So again, the importance of using the documentary, using archive in our work, and also visual archive, which we use a lot, and. So the visual archive that we use a lot, which make the documentary even more lively, even more interesting, listening to Lee Kuan Yew talking about how excited he was about, this idea of Malaysia and something that he had built with Tunku Abdul Rahman since '61, at that time when he gave that speech in August '62, really made me feel that I was living in the past. Again, the importance of archive in our work, which we use a lot. So basically, this is the kind of a part of the genre that we, the treatment that we we use in our documentaries. So it could be observational docudrama, which we use a lot, a little bit in our this year's production of Sarawak documentary, because the 1800, there was very little archive to be used. So we had to reenact many of the things that James Charles and Charles Viner, mainly just James and Charles Brooke did in the past, and how they were, they were dealing with the Dayak and the Orang Ulu community when it comes to building the state that they believe in. So we use a lot of reenactment in that, and then but again, it's a mixture of a dramatic reenactment that we use and also historical part of it. I think coming back to the Sarawak one, the late 1800, when we started to have a lot more archive, and then that's when I think archival stuff like letters and newspaper articles and pictures were more available compared to video, compared to mid 1800, where I think the best at that time, that if you watch my documentary on National Geographic, there was a lot of only images and paintings by the European artists, and also sketches of letters and telegram that were not properly typed, or it was more like handwritten, so you can barely read it actually. So the usage of archive in our work was more on late 1800 to from early 1900 onwards. Okay, so before I go to okay, so that's my archival usage in Red Focus Film documentaries. So I'm gonna just play another trailer, the second one. This is about the Sarawak documentary that I mentioned, and it's a part 2 of it. So you can see again, even in our trailer, we use a little bit of an archive. We put a little bit of archiving it, but we use it quite extensive in the actual 1 hour or 2 hour documentary.
They did not know that Viner Brooke had already contacted London about selling Sarawak to London.
The reaction first was, we want to be involved in decision making.
The British was pushing this one. Urban people were not in favor of it.
There was a general consensus that we really have to be independent first.
All this in a space of 2 to 3 years, in a very uncertain future.
Okay, so that's again from the Road to Nation, one of the 7 episodes we have successfully produced. These are the series. These are part of a series. These are all of the series, in fact, in few parts. So we have all 7 episodes all together. Again, we are very grateful for the assistance that we have from Akib Negara when it comes to our work. Of course, we work closely with the New Straits Times as our partner in this documentary, but a lot of the stuff that New Straits Times may not have, we really have to depend on Akib Negara in order to get the archive. And as much, I think looking at that building is just actually opposite where I work. I feel like there's so much more that can be explored in Akib. In fact, I'm sure in any country's archive agency, that there are a lot more to be explored. And I think with the advent of better technology, I hope we can actually produce even better content in the future with more availability of it. I think FINAS is doing something with their system in order to actually assist producers to actually use more of their archive in their work. I think we are only very few of historical documentary filmmakers in this region, not even in Malaysia, to actually is consistently using archive in our work. And that's really sad, because I don't know, maybe I'm an old soul. I just like to see old stuff. I like to see old archive and, pictures with a little bit of a botch, film damage that makes me feel really make me feel excited and wanted to explore more why such picture was taken. So, okay, so the next, so this is just a poster I just wanted to share to you about the undeclared war. It's a it's about 5 to 6 years history of the confrontasi and how the idea of Malaysia was getting. The idea of Malaysia was getting Sukarno had issues with us forming Malaysia, and then and we really wanted to talk about that. And this documentary really even changed my mind personally about Sukarno and why he opposed to it. And I think we didn't get to say a lot about a lot of the history of why Sukarno opposed to it, but we managed to talk as much as we could within 48 minutes. And then, yeah, I hope that we could do more in the future. And I'm starting to be more interested, in fact, in the history of Indonesia, because it's such a beautiful, such an inspiring history. Yeah, in different way. I mean, our history is inspiring too, but theirs is a lot more struggles, where ours is a little bit more peaceful. So, and the next one is, of course, it's quite successful on the rating for the Sarawak one. Of course, now that people are very, very interested in Malaysia Agreement 63 and why the Sarawak leaders signed it, we somehow talk about it in this documentary. It was out two weeks ago on the National Geographic, and you can still catch it nowadays in Astro and National Geographic, if I'm not mistaken. This is something that I show. That I showed just now. The trailer that I showed just now was this one. So I'm just gonna close my presentation with part of my documentaries from last year, and then this particular segment has a lot of archive that we use, a lot of footage that we use from agencies from ARCIP till FINAS to RTM, and even to many agencies in America and in England. So I'm just gonna play part of it, and I'm just gonna cue when it stops. And then you can see that this is what I do, and this is how I use archive in the work that I do. Yeah.
The Malaysia Plan incurs Sukarno's wrath. He declares a confrontation against Malaysia.
President Sukarno saw the Borneo territories as naturally extension of the Indonesian concept. Basically, he wanted to be seen as first among equals in maritime Southeast Asia.
Philippines President Diosdado Macapagal lends his support to Sukarno.
Manila felt that the territory of Sabah was at least part of the original Sulu Sultanate. If Sulu was part of the Philippines, then Philippines had an indirect claim to the whole Sabah, and that Malaysia should not be formed without consulting with Manila.
Indonesia, supported by the Philippines, dismisses the work of the Cobalt Commission. They demand a United Nations inquiry to determine the true intent of those living in North Borneo and Sarawak.
The Tunku didn't have a choice because these two leaders refused to accept the Cobalt Commission report, which is a British report. So they wanted a UN report, which is, as you know, more international.
Tunku decides to meet Sukarno and Macapagal in Manila to seek a solution.
I suspect these two leaders forced him into it and said, you want to go ahead with the Federation? We want proof that these people actually want to join the Federation of Malaysia.
But Tunku's accommodation angers the British Prime Minister.
He was upset, I think, because he felt that Tunku was being weak. Tunku was having to ride two horses at the same time. He had to make sure that his relationships with Manila and Indonesia were good, as well as his relationship with Britain. And he was a regional power amongst regional powers, and one can see why the Tunku went along with that. Even though the Tunku may have tried to reassure Macmillan that it'll come out all right in the end, we're only doing this sort of face-saving exercise.
On the 16th of August 1963, two UN teams arrive in Sarawak and North Borneo to begin their tasks. But their work is withheld indefinitely.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a documentary that I produced last year, and then again the use of archive a lot, and we use this treatment of collage on a piece of paper, and then there was this and we have this camera moving along and going through all these events that happened throughout those few weeks between the British, the Malaysian, and the Indonesian, and the Filipinos, and of course the UN that eventually postponed the whole idea of Malaysia Day being on the 31st of August 1963, which a lot of us wonder why Malaysia Day is on the 16th and not 31st, and this is why. It's because of the UN mission, and there was a tension happened between Indonesia and Philippines and in Malaysia and the UN and the British. So okay, so that's just that's it. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Warm welcome to all of you. Okay, I think you just relax because I'm not a kind who present papers. I think the last time I present my paper was about 25 years ago. So you can relax, take off your coat. Okay. My slide. Sorry. Okay. I'm so envy as a filmmaker that I heard Singapore, for already 11 years, if not mistaken, 12 years, coming to 12 years. They have got this archive of Asian film archive. That is marvelous. Everybody heard about this Library of Congress, and I'm also jealous that they have bought everything to the right of Pramudia Anantatur. Okay, I'm proud of that, and I'm sure this our archive here, Southeast Asian, could do into another field at that level. Okay, so here I am going to propose. I'm going to propose. Okay. Okay, Amo. This is one of film I did. Okay, film I did, which at the end of it I will show a little bit. Okay. A director makes only one movie in his life, then he breaks into pieces and makes it again. Okay, so what happens to me, this subject of Malay psychic, actually, it all started from my own lineage of family. My grandmother was one of the shaman of the village. So, that is a subject I've been dwelling. So, as the director have said, director only made one movie. The rest of it are from that movie, which cut into pieces. So, I've made about 18 dramas, telemovies, most of them plus 3 movies, Amo, Palo, and Bintang Malam actually were about that. Okay, so I realized that when I did my first film, of course, I have to do a lot of research. I went to archive, I went to Malaysian archive, I went everywhere, and then I found one of the most helpful book that, educate me, open up my mind about this issue of Malay psychic. To me, so far, this is the best, which given me a lot of information about it. Okay? But actually, the question of Amo, the question of Malay psychic, there is no end to it, for example. There is no end to it. Until today, so it had become now my long life studies, like long life mission or long life research until today, because the subject of Malay psychic, actually, for all this while, from the book, from our archive, from everywhere that I keep on hunting until today, they came from the Western idea. They were documented by first Portuguese as early as 1516, and then until later in the modern, where we found 1930s, one of the best description of Malay psychic and Amok is Falconer, the Soul of Malaya. But still it was written by a French. And finally, a little bit by our Prime Minister, Malay Dilemma, on Amok. But he ended up by saying that it's now a legend. It's now a legend. Whereas all these things doesn't end there. Okay. Now let's go to somewhere which I want to share. Okay, which I want to share. What I want to share here is that in my core of mission, in all my life work, which I consider as lifelong learning or lifelong research, started from my curiosity on the subject of Malay psychic or Amok, actually. I sort of, after going through, I discovered the reason why there is no end to this, what you call Malay psychic, because we never allow, or we never got a chance, or we never think deeply enough that this Malay psychic was discovered by the Western people, and they are the one who assess it, and they are the one who document it. So it was not looked from the perspective of our own. Okay, one of it because we were colonized. Malaya, the time, was colonized. Well, more than 400 years now. More than 400 years now. Okay. Let me reflect a bit about this colonization, okay? I discovered that through the Islamization of archipelago, we had reached to the peak, the excellence of our Malay culture or Malay way of life, to somewhere 1914. That's where, there's a time, if you heard of Hamzah Fansuri, where Aceh was at their prime, you know. But we were colonized since then, after Portuguese captured Malacca, 1511 onward, yeah, or earlier than that. So when we were colonized, everything, all our mind, all our mentality, our schooling, our education changed. But the Malays, that we discovered the Malay psychic, started as early, this possible, like Amok itself, it started before we even been Islamized. There were records saying that Amok, the practice of Amok that happens to the Malays, doesn't only happen during the Islamization, which the, what you call, the colonial, the British was accusing that part of accusation they put to this Amok practice was because it's Mohammedan, because of the Islamic, because of many. Okay, so now I don't want to dwell deeply into what we call this Amok. Okay, another thing which interests me was actually. I found during my what you call researching and helps I got from Dr. Chia Boon Keng, Chia Boon Keng, who wrote a lot of books on communism in Malaya at that time. He wrote a lot of, and I was sitting with him, and then I discovered that he said, I want to write a historical book again on Tok Janggut. I said, why? Because Tok Janggut was already written, on screen there. Tok Janggut was already written by Nick Anwar Muhammad in 1999. Chia Boon Keng wanted to rewrite it again in 2006. I said, why? Because the perspective. I want to give a different perspective because he said it to me because when Nick wrote it, it was a time during, and Nick being a Kelantanese, and he was on the Islamic ruling in Kelantan, so they want to glamorize or heroship Tok Janggut. So the whole perspective that was written by Nick Zanal was guided or determined by that value. He said, I want to rewrite. I want to write another version. And he said, he said he wants to write it like Kurosawa wrote and directed a movie called Rashomon. I said, why? So he said, Rashomon is about various perspectives. It's a story about a tragedy, about a bandit killing a samurai and raping his wife. Look back from 3 perspectives. That's what he said. So that actually inspires me. That means perspective, worldview of people looking at things, people interpreting things is such an important issue.
Wan, kita harus berjaga-jaga. Dari biasanya, Wan lebih mudah tersentuh sekarang. I don't want him to suspect there is something between us. Understand?
Kita bertiga kan akan rapat. Wan tahu. Anyway, dia tu tak mudah jealous. Dia tu bukan old fashion, man.
Kata dia.
Kenapa kau lebih syokkan Wan daripada aku, ha?
Kerana Wan seorang Melayu yang authentic. Jati. No. Tulen.
So, I macam mana?
You are a decadent Melayu.
Dendam pasukan Jepun terhadap orang Cina sudah terbalas. Dikatakan 60,000 telah terbunuh dalam peristiwa Sub Chin semasa 1941. Sekarang giliran orang Cina membalas apabila Force 136 mula membantu Bintang 3. Keadaan kembali huru-hara. Ramai yang jadi korban, termasuklah polis Jepun tempatan yang dituduh menjadi tali barut. Dalam sengsara angkara perebutan kuasa asing, Jepun dan British.
Okay. My proposal is based on my last experience when I did Palo, that movie Palo, from the help of Chia Boon Keng, doing all the research. I discovered that, you know why Japanese went to war, Second World War? And the message and the thing that they brought when they attacked Malaya, it was the slogan, "Free Asia for Asia." Yeah? Free Asia for Asia. That was the theme I wanted to put on Palo, but I could not get it. I could not get it because the material in the, what you call, in our archive, the material in our archive, material in the books everywhere, were always documented or written or whatever, recorded, as our friend just showed all those, what you call, archive material. They were from a perspective of either a foreign who doesn't even understand. And I really studied in depth about us. So actually, I have to read a little bit where I found, about this Japanese during the war. You see, the Japanese in the Second World War, backing Germany, Italy, all that, slogan was Asia for Asia to win support from local Malays. The Japanese worked hard to convince the local population that they were the actual survivor, savior of Malaya, while Britain was portrayed as an imperialist force that wished to exploit Malaya's resources. 2, when occupied Malaya was placed under a Malay military administration, just a bit, the 25th Army Chief Staff was the Superintendent, Chief General Affairs Department, Colonel Watanabe Wataru. Its executive officer, it was Wataru that implemented the occupation policies. He had a particularly hard-line view, treating the Chinese particularly harshly because of their support for mainland China against Japanese. Malays and Indians were dealt with more moderately because of their cooperation. Wataru strongly believed British rule had introduced a hedonistic and materialistic way of life to the indigenous people. And I want to portray this. I don't get it. So I am proposing that Archive, Southeast Asian Archive, to incorporate, to adopt this perspective as one of the strategy in building up, making the archive a better place for rujukan reference. So thank you.